Young Adult Ailey Readers. A Study in Scarlett. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Adapted by Elizabeth Ferretti. Copyright Ailey 2016. Chapter 1. Mr. Sherlock Holmes. My name is Dr. John Watson. It's 1881, and I'm living in a hotel in London. But for 2 years before this, I was in Afghanistan. There were problems between the British and the Afghans then. I'm a doctor, and I went there because they needed my help. After some months, I felt very bad, and I had to stay in hospital in India for a long time. When I was better, I came to London by boat. I don't have a house in England, so when I arrived, I went to live in a hotel in a good street in London. Everyone goes to London. It's an exciting city. My hotel is nice and clean, but life isn't easy. I'm not a well man, and because I don't have any friends or family here, I don't have anyone to talk to. My biggest problem is the hotel. It's too expensive. Yesterday, I started to look for somewhere cheaper to live. This morning I needed to think, so I went for a walk. After a few minutes, I heard someone say my name. I looked behind me and saw an old friend called Stamford, who studied with me to be a doctor. We went to have lunch. "Where did you go after you finished university, Watson?" he asked, when we got to the restaurant. "You don't look well, but your face is brown." I told him about Afghanistan and India. "Now I'm looking for somewhere to live. Do you know anyone who can help me?" I said when I finished. "Yes, Sherlock Holmes," Stamford said. "He often comes to the hospital where I work. He's looking for someone to live with him." "That's good," I said happily. Stamford looked at me. "You don't know Sherlock Holmes, do you? He's not a bad man, but he can be difficult." We arrived at London Hospital and went into a big room. There was only one student working there. When he saw us, he said excitedly, "I have it! I have it!" "Dr. Watson, this is Sherlock Holmes," said Stamford. "How are you?" Sherlock Holmes said to me. He looked friendly. "I see that you were in Afghanistan before you came to London." "How did you know that?" I asked. "It's not important," he said. "Today I found something that will help the police." "Help the police?" Sherlock Holmes didn't answer my question. "Dr. Watson is looking for somewhere to live," Stamford said. "That's good," he said. "Tomorrow I'm going to look at a nice place in Baker Street. It's very nice. There is a woman who will cook and clean for us. I think you'll like it. But will you like me?" "I think so," I answered. "Sometimes I don't speak for many days," he said, "and I play the violin. Will that be a problem?" "I don't talk much," I said, "and I like the violin when it's played well." "Then meet me here tomorrow at 12 o'clock, he said. "Goodbye." And he went back to his work. We left him. "How did he know I was in Afghanistan? Did you tell him?" I asked Stamford. "No," said Stamford. "That's Sherlock Holmes. He knows everything, and nobody understands how. It's a mystery." I thought about my new friend that night, and the next day we went together to 221B Baker Street. The rooms were good and not expensive. There were 2 bedrooms and a big living room with 2 windows. That evening, I moved my things from the hotel. Sherlock Holmes isn't a difficult man to live with. He doesn't talk much, he goes to bed before 10, has an early breakfast, and often goes to the hospital to work. Sherlock Holmes is very tall and thin, and has a long nose like a bird. When he looks at me, I always feel he can hear what I'm thinking. I watch him every day, but I can't understand much about him or the work he does. He's a mystery. I often got up from bed late, but one morning I woke up early and went into the living room. It was the 4th of March. I remember the day well, because this was when everything started. Sherlock Holmes was at breakfast. I said good morning, sat down at the table with him, and started to read the newspaper. Then I saw something that looked interesting. It was called The Book of Life, and I started to read. It is important to look. You can learn a lot from looking hard and thinking about what you see. For example, you can learn everything about a man by looking at his face and watching how he walks or talks. You can understand what he is thinking, and you will know what he did yesterday and what he will do tomorrow. You could think this is not possible, but I know that it is possible. Give me a small cup of water, and I can tell you if it is from the Atlantic or the Niagara. If you work hard, you will be great. You must start with easy questions. When you meet someone for the first time, you can learn with only one short look what his job is. Look at his hands. Look at his clothes, his shirt, and his boots. Put all of this together, then you will have your answer. If you do this, then you will understand every mystery. "Are you studying to be a doctor?" I asked, after I put butter on my bread. He looked at me with those eyes. "No," he answered. Next, I asked him about some famous writers and what he thought about their books. He didn't know any of them. Then I asked him about the world. "Do you know that our world goes around the sun?" I said. "No, I don't," he said. "And now I will forget what you said." "Forget that our world goes around the sun?" I asked. "Yes, that is what I said. You see, it's not good to remember too much," he said. "I think that our heads are like a small house. You cannot put hundreds of tables and chairs inside. If you bring a new chair in, then you have to take one out. I only remember things that are important." "But," I said, "to know that our world goes around the sun isn't important for my work," he said. "I look at everything, I watch everyone, and I ask many questions about what I see. I work hard to understand things that other people can't understand. It's my business. It's how I pay for my bread and cheese." "How?" I asked. "Here in London we have a lot of policemen," he said, "but they're not very good policemen. They and other people come to ask my help. They pay me to find answers to their questions." "I see," I said. I thought for a minute. Then I asked, "How did you know I was in Afghanistan? You are not a well man, and your face and hands are brown, but your arms are white. I think you are in a hot country. The British have problems in Afghanistan, so it's easy. That's where you were before you came to London." "Ah," I said. "Stamford said you always know everything." "I think a lot," he said. "That's why I'm different from most people." Every week, people came to see him. They often looked sad. Some of them seemed to have a lot of problems. Once it was a young girl. Then an old woman came and talked to him for a long time. Another day it was an old man who looked very poor. One man, Mr. Lestrade, visited us many times. When these people came, I went to my bedroom. Sherlock said he couldn't talk to me about what they told him. When they left, they sometimes looked happy, and sometimes they looked sadder than when they arrived. Mr. Lestrade always walked away very quickly when he left us. This was our life for many months. In that time, I started to feel better. I liked living in Baker Street. I liked Sherlock. Then, one morning, Sherlock wasn't happy. He took his violin and started to play, but stopped after 2 minutes. "It's so boring today," he said. "There's nothing exciting in this city. I'm the best man in London to help the police, but I can't help them if they don't come to me." I looked out of the window and saw a man walking on Baker Street, looking at all the numbers on the doors. He saw our door, 221B, and ran across the road to our house. The woman who lives at the bottom of the house opened the door. The man came up to our rooms. "For Mr. Sherlock Holmes," he said. He gave my friend a letter. Then he left. "Ah," said Sherlock Holmes. "Now, this is more interesting." Chapter 2. The Lorriston Gardens Mystery. "Will you read it to me?" Sherlock asked, giving me the letter. "My dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes," I read. "Last night, we found the body of a man at 3 Lorriston Gardens in Brixton, London. A policeman saw a light in a house where no one is living now and went to look. Inside, he found a dead man. He had a lot of business cards with the name Enoch J. Drebber, Cleveland, Ohio, USA on them. We cannot understand how he died, and no one took his money or his watch. It's a mystery. Lestrade is also here. Will you come to the house and help us? Yours, Tobias Gregson." "I'll get a taxi," I said. "Those 2 policemen, Gregson and Lestrade, won't tell anyone if I help them, but I think it'll be fun to find an answer to this mystery, don't you? Come on." We got our hats and coats, and 1 minute later we were in a taxi going to Lorriston Gardens. On our journey, Sherlock didn't say anything about the dead man. He only talked about violins. The taxi arrived in Brixton, and we got out. Number 3 Lorriston Gardens wasn't a nice house. The windows were dark and cold. In the garden, the plants were tall and big. Sherlock didn't go into the house, but stayed outside, looking at the road and the garden for a long time. I couldn't understand what he was doing. The dead man was in the house, not in the garden or on the road. Then, after 10 or 15 minutes, we went to the door, where we met a tall man with blonde hair. He had a book and pencil in his hand. "Good morning, Mr. Gregson," said Sherlock. "Good morning, Mr. Holmes. I'm happy you're here," Gregson answered. "Lestrade is inside. Come with me." I followed them into the hall. On the right was an open door, but I didn't want to see what was in the room. It was a big room, but there were no tables or chairs in it. The only thing in the room was the dead man. He was about 43 or 44 years old and had expensive clothes on. I looked at his face. He looked like a bad man, and I thought the world was better now he was dead. But we had to find out why he died. Most importantly, we had to find out who did it. Sherlock went to the dead man and looked at him, his clothes, and the room. There was a lot of blood on the floor, but it was not from the dead man. He didn't have any blood on his body. After 20 minutes, Sherlock finished. 4 policemen came in and picked the dead man up, and under him there was a small ring on the floor. "Did the man have anything inside his coat?" asked Sherlock Holmes. "Yes," answered Gregson, taking out his book. "I wrote it down. He had a large ring, some business cards with the name Enoch J. Drebber, a book with the name Joseph Stangerson written inside, and 2 letters about a boat to New York that Drebber and Stangerson wanted to take." "Does anyone know Stangerson?" asked Sherlock. "I sent a message to Cleveland in the USA this morning," said Gregson, "but we've heard nothing from them." Lestrade was at the back of the room. "Look," he said, "there's writing on the wall." We went over and saw the word Rach written in blood. "It's a woman's name, Rachel," said Lestrade. "The person who wrote this didn't finish. This is all about a woman." "No," said Sherlock, "there's no Rachel here. Rache is the German word for revenge. I think Drebber is dead because he did something bad to the man who wrote Rache. And now that man wanted to do something bad to Drebber. That is revenge." "Now," Sherlock said, "we must speak to the policeman who found the body last night. What is his name, and where does he live?" "He's called John Rance," Lestrade said. "He's a good man, but he won't be pleased to see you. He was working last night, and now he is sleeping." Sherlock wasn't listening to that. "Where does he live?" he asked again. "You will find him at 46 Audley Court, Kennington Park Gate. It's not far," said Gregson. "Thank you," said Sherlock. "We will only speak to him for a short time. Then he can go back to sleep. I think a dead man is more important than a few minutes of sleep, don't you?" We left Lestrade and Gregson. Outside in the street, we found a taxi. We jumped in and told the driver to take us to a street not far away. "I think that Drebber and another man arrived in a taxi," said Sherlock, while we were travelling to see Mr. Rance, who was, at this time, asleep in his bed. He didn't know we were coming to wake him up. "He gave Drebber something very bad to eat, a poison. That's how he died. The other man is tall." "Where's the taxi driver?" I asked. "Where did the blood come from? Why did the tall man want Drebber to die? Why did Drebber eat the poison? Why did the tall man write Rache?" "It's difficult," said Sherlock. "I think we'll call this mystery A Study in Scarlett, because scarlet is the colour of blood." Sherlock and I went to knock at the door of the policeman who found Drebber's body. His wife opened the door and kindly called her husband for us. When he came out of his bedroom, he looked very tired, and I felt sad for him. Sherlock didn't see that. He just started asking about what happened in Lorriston Gardens. "It was 2 in the morning. I saw a light in the window of Lorriston Gardens, but no one lives in that house. So I went to have a look." "Very good," said Sherlock. "I found the body in the old dining room. I needed to find another policeman to help me, so I went back to the street. There was no one in the street except a very tall man. He wasn't important. He was drinking wine, and I couldn't understand what he was saying, so I told him to leave. I shouted, and another policeman came." "Where did that tall man go?" asked Sherlock. "I don't know," answered the policeman. "Why not?" Sherlock asked. He left the house and didn't say goodbye to Rance. "He's the worst policeman I know," said Sherlock. "That tall man was the one we want. He came back to the house to find that ring we found under Drebber when the policeman came to take him away." Later, we put a note in the London newspapers. Found. 1 ring, perhaps a woman's. If it is yours, come to 221B Baker Street between 8 and 9 this evening. Dr. John Watson. Sherlock gave me a ring like the one from Lorriston Gardens, and we waited. Perhaps the tall man will come, I thought. Then we can catch him. Or perhaps he will send a friend. Just after 8 o'clock, someone came to our door. The person came into the house and up to our rooms. We were ready for him. But when the door opened, we didn't see a tall man. It was an old woman. She told us it was her daughter's ring. She was pleased to find it. Her daughter's husband was a difficult man, and she was always worried about him. She took the ring, and then she left. Sherlock ran to get his coat and went out after her. I looked out of the window. The old woman called a taxi. Sherlock was close behind her. He got on to the back of the old woman's taxi, and it left. I didn't see him again until 12 o'clock that night. When he came back, he looked tired. "I have something funny to tell you," he said, and he sat down. "Don't tell Gregson or Lestrade, but I lost that old woman." "How?" I asked. I couldn't understand how the great Sherlock Holmes could lose an old woman. She called a taxi and gave the driver her address, 13 Duncan Street. I sat on the back of her taxi until we got to Duncan Street. The driver opened the door for her, but there was no one inside. We asked at number 13, but a young family lived there, not an old woman. "Are you telling me that old woman left the taxi when it was travelling?" I asked. "That wasn't an old woman," said Sherlock. "That was a young man who looked like an old woman. Our tall man has friends who will help him. Now, Doctor, you look tired. Go to bed and get some sleep." I went to bed. Sherlock Holmes stayed in the living room and played his violin until late in the night. I was very tired, but I couldn't sleep. There was so much to think about. Chapter 3. The Wrong Man. The next day, the newspapers all talked about the Brixton mystery, and I learnt new things from them about Mr. Drebber and Mr. Stangerson. Mr. Drebber was an American. He was staying at Madame Charpentier's hotel on Torquay Terrace near Euston Station. Staying with him was Joseph Stangerson, also American, who worked for Mr. Drebber. The two men said goodbye to Mrs. Charpentier on Tuesday. They wanted to catch a train from Euston Station to Liverpool. In Liverpool, they had a boat to New York. Later on Tuesday night, the body of Mr. Drebber was found many kilometres away in Brixton. Nobody could understand why he was in Brixton or how he got there. Nobody knew where Stangerson was. "It is good," one newspaper said, "that Mr. Gregson and Mr. Lestrade are working on the mystery. We are sure they will find out everything soon." I didn't read the name of Sherlock Holmes. They only talked about Gregson and Lestrade. Those two policemen told everyone they were working on the mystery. They didn't tell anyone about asking Sherlock for help. While I read the papers, I heard a lot of noise and lots of feet running up to our rooms. The door opened, and there were 6 young boys, no more than about 10 years old. They were very poor, with old clothes, and they needed to wash. "Who are these boys?" I asked. I wasn't happy to see them in my home. "This is the Baker Street Police," Sherlock said, looking at them. They stopped talking and stood as tall as they could. "Any news, Wiggins?" my friend asked the oldest boy. "No," Nothing, answered Wiggins. Now go, and come later. The children ran out of the room and into the street. Those boys are better than 10 policemen, said Sherlock. Nobody sees them, and they hear things that a policeman will never hear. He took his violin and started to play a happy song. Are they working for you on the Brixton mystery? I asked. Yes, he answered. I'm sure they'll find what I'm looking for soon. Ah, here's Gregson coming to see us, he said, looking out of the window. He looks very happy about something. The door opened for the second time, and in came Gregson. I have the answer to our mystery, he said. His name is Arthur Charpentier, the son of Madame Charpentier, who has a hotel in Camberwell. Please tell us everything. How did you find out about Madame Charpentier's? Said Sherlock. Ah, Mr. Holmes, listen to this, and you will learn something, said Gregson. I looked at Holmes, but I don't think he was really listening to Gregson. Inside Drebber's coat was the name of an expensive clothes shop in Bond Street. I went to the shop to ask about the American. They remembered him because they sent their coat to Madame Charpentier's hotel. And that is how I found Madame Charpentier and her son Arthur. I went to see her today. She was with her daughter, but I could see that something was wrong. The girl was very pretty, but she looked tired. Did you know that a man who stayed in your hotel, Mr. Drebber, is dead, madame? I asked. The mother said yes, but did not say more. What time did Mr. Drebber leave your house to get the train at Euston? I asked her. At 8 o'clock, she said. Mr. Stangerson, the man who works for him, found out the train left at 9:15. Did you see Mr. Drebber again after he went to the station? I asked. I didn't see him after he went to the station, she said, but the daughter looked at the mother. We have to tell Mr. Gregson about Arthur, mother, she said. Then she ran out of the room. Arthur is my son, said Madame Charpentier. Mr. Drebber didn't die because of him, but you will think that he did. Mr. Stangerson was a quiet man, but Mr. Drebber was not. Mr. Drebber was a bad man. He drank a lot of wine and always spoke to my daughter in a bad way. Mr. Drebber came back that night because he didn't catch his train. He took my daughter, kissed her, and said he wanted to take her away. My daughter didn't want to be with him, and then my son arrived home. He was very unhappy with Mr. Drebber and took him out of the house. He didn't do it, Mr. Gregson. My son is a good boy. This is exciting, Sherlock said, but he looked bored. I asked her some more questions about her son, said Gregson. What time did your son come back after he took Drebber out of the house? I don't know, she said. I waited for an hour or two, but then I went to bed and fell asleep. So your son was away for 2 hours? Yes. And perhaps for 4 or 5 hours? Yes, she said. That was when I knew I had the right man. I found Arthur and took him to the police station, said Gregson. It's funny, but Lestrade is looking for Stangerson. He's looking for the wrong man. Ah, here he is now, he said, looking out of the window. Lestrade was the next person in our home. He looked very worried and wasn't happy to see Gregson. Don't worry, Lestrade, said Gregson. I've got our man. Did you find Stangerson? Yes, said Lestrade. I found him at Halliday's Hotel at 8 this morning. He was dead. So, our man wasn't Arthur Charpentier. Someone saw Drebber and Stangerson at Euston Station at 8:30 on Tuesday evening, Lestrade said. Then we found Drebber in Brixton at 2 in the morning. I asked everywhere about Stangerson. Then I found out that Stangerson waited for Drebber in a hotel near the station called Halliday's. A young boy who works at the hotel took me up to Stangerson's room. But when we got there, we saw scarlet blood running under the door. The boy and I opened the door and found Stangerson. He was near the open window on the floor. He was dead and cold. Someone put a long knife into his heart. There was a lot of blood. Lestrade stopped for a minute. We found another thing. Do you know what it was? He asked. It was the word rush, written in blood, Lestrade said. We have to catch that tall man, I said. We don't want another dead person. Did you find other things in the room? Asked Sherlock. There was a small box near the window with 2 white pills inside, but they aren't important. You're wrong. They're the most important thing in this mystery, said Sherlock. Now, please give me those pills. Watson, will you get that poor old dog from the lady at the bottom of the house? I got the dog. Sherlock took half of one pill and put it in a glass of milk. Yesterday, the lady asked me to help her old dog to die because he isn't well. I think this will work, he said. The little dog drank the milk, but it didn't die. Sherlock looked unhappy. Why isn't it dead? Why? He asked, walking around the room. Then he said, I have it! I have it! He took half of the second pill and put it into another glass of milk. The dog drank it and died very quickly. You see, one pill had poison in and the other was sugar. We were all looking at the dog when the young boy Wiggins arrived. I have it, Wiggins said. Sherlock looked very happy. Would you ask the taxi driver to come up and carry my things? Said Sherlock. What was Sherlock doing? I didn't know he wanted to travel. I didn't understand what was happening. Lestrade and Gregson looked at each other. We heard a man walking up to our rooms. He opened the door and came in. He was wearing the clothes of a taxi driver and was very tall. Sherlock was near the door. When the tall man came in, Sherlock caught him. The man wanted to run away, so Lestrade, Gregson and I all ran over to help Sherlock. We all had to work hard to stop this big man. This is Mr. Jefferson Hope, Sherlock said when we had the taxi driver. Enoch Drebber and Joseph Stangerson are dead because of this man. When he heard this, the man ran away from us again. He wanted to go through the window, but Sherlock and Lestrade caught him. Now he couldn't go anywhere. Take him to the police station at Scotland Yard, said Sherlock. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer your questions. Chapter 4. Lucy Ferrier. Many years ago, when the white man came to live in America, there was a big place called the Sierra Blanco in Colorado and Utah. It was a bad place where nobody could live. It had no water, no trees, no birds or animals. There was nothing but sun and dry salt. On May the 4th, 1847, a tall man stood on a small mountain. If you saw him then, you couldn't say if he was 40 or 60 years old. He was dying because he couldn't find anything to eat or drink. He was looking for water, but there was no water anywhere. I think my time has come, he said to himself. If I die now or if I die in my bed 20 years from now, it is the same thing. He found a place to sit. He was carrying something inside a big coat. He put it down, and the thing started to cry. Out came a small face with big brown eyes and blonde hair. It was a little girl about 5 years old, in a pink dress. "Ow, my head," she said. "Kiss it better like Mother did." "Where's Mother?" The man kissed it. "Mother's gone. I think you'll see her again soon." "Gone?" said the little girl in the pink dress. "She didn't say goodbye. She's been away for 3 days now. Hey, there's no water here, and nothing to eat." "No, dear girl. Do you remember we don't have any water? Mr. Bender was the first to die, then Indian Pete and Mrs. McGregor, then your mother." "So Mother is dead too?" The little girl started to cry. Then she stopped. "Will we die soon?" "Yes," the man answered. The little girl looked happy again. "Then we'll soon see Mother, and she'll have water and food for us." Then the old man and the little girl sat together and fell asleep. Only half an hour later, everything changed. Travelling over this dry place were thousands and thousands of people. Men riding horses, women carrying heavy things, children and old people, and hundreds of horses. There were 12 men on horses at the start of these people. They stopped under the mountain where the old man and the little girl slept. The men needed to find the right road past the mountain. Then one of the young men saw something pink on the mountain. He took 4 other men with him to see what it was. They found the man and the girl in the pink dress and woke them up. "We're with thousands of people," the young man said. "We're travelling together to find a place to build a new city where we can be safe." "I'm John Ferrier," the man said. "This little girl and I were with 20 other people, but they're all dead now." "Is she your daughter?" asked the young man. "No, but from today I'll call her Lucy Ferrier." The man helped John and Lucy come down the mountain and took them to see a man. He looked important. "My name is Brigham Young," said the man. "I'm taking these people to find a new place to live. You can come with us, and we will feed you. But you will live like us and do what I tell you, or we will leave you here to die." "We don't want to die, so we'll come with you, and we'll live like you," John said. After travelling for many weeks, they came to a river, and here they built Salt Lake City. John worked and worked, and after 12 years he had a lot of money. Lucy was happy with John, who was like a father to her. She was 18 now, and the most beautiful young woman in Salt Lake City. One day, John Ferrier needed something from the city. He asked Lucy to go on her horse to get it for him. On the road were thousands and thousands of cows. Lucy was good with horses, but hers didn't like the cows and wanted to run away. It didn't look good for Lucy. Then she heard a man's voice next to her. "I'm Jefferson Hope," he said. and took Lucy's horse away from the cows. "I hope you are okay. Are you John Ferrier's daughter?" the young man asked. "I am," said Lucy. "Then ask him if he remembers the Jefferson Hope family of St. Louis. I think my father and he were good friends when they were young." "You must come and tell him yourself," Lucy Ferrier said. "He will want to say thank you. He loves me and says he couldn't live if I died." The young man looked very happy. Lucy was too young to understand, but when Jefferson Hope saw her, he knew he loved her. "I will do everything I can to make her my wife," he said to himself. Then he took his horse and followed the cows into Salt Lake City to get water and food for them. That evening, Jefferson Hope came to John's house. He didn't live in Salt Lake City, but he came back the next night and the next. Soon Lucy and he were in love. Then, one day, Jefferson arrived on his horse and came walking to the house with his long legs. Lucy was in front of the house. "I have to go away to the mountains, my beautiful girl," he said. "But I'll be back in 2 months. And when I am back, we will be man and wife." Then he took Lucy and he kissed her. It wasn't easy in Salt Lake City. Brigham Young told everyone how to live. John Ferrier wasn't happy with that, but he didn't say anything. People who didn't do what Brigham Young said often died. One day, Brigham Young came to the door. "I hear Lucy loves a man from outside Salt Lake City," he said. "Lucy is beautiful. She will be the wife of a man from this city, not that other man. There are 2 men here who want her, Enoch Drebber and Joseph Stangerson. She has 1 month to choose, Enoch or Joseph." When he went, Lucy came into the room. She was crying. "I can't be with them," she said. "I love Jefferson." "I know," said John. "We'll send him a message. He'll help us." They sent a message to Jefferson. They went to bed, but in the morning they saw something very bad. On the door of the house was the number 30 written in white. What was it? 30 was the number of days until Lucy had to be the wife of Drebber or Stangerson. The next day, when John Ferrier woke up, there was the number 29 on his bed. "They have come into my house at night," John said. "How did they get in?" He went to look at all the doors and windows, but they were all okay. Every day they found a new number, in the kitchen or somewhere in the house. 28, 27, 26, 3, 2, 1. But Jefferson Hope did not come. On the last night, Lucy said good night to her father. "I will never see Jefferson again," she said. She went to bed, but she didn't sleep. The man she loved was not here, and tomorrow she had to marry a different man. She was very sad. Then John and Lucy heard a noise. They looked out of the window and saw Jefferson. "I have come to take you and Lucy away," he said to John. "I have horses in the mountains." Lucy took her old pink dress. John took money, food, and water. They went together into the dark night and travelled from the city. On the 3rd day, Jefferson went to find food. But when he came back, John Ferrier was dead and Lucy was gone. He went back to Salt Lake City and asked a friend about Lucy. "I'm sorry to tell you, they found her. She's now the wife of Enoch Drebber. He doesn't love her," said his friend. "He only wanted her for John's money. She's very unhappy. I think she'll die soon." He was right. Lucy died after 1 month. The women in Drebber's family were sad. On the night after she died, they sat with her dead body. It was 2 in the morning when a man came into the house and took the ring off her finger. He kissed her face. "I will take this ring, because she had my heart, not Drebber's. They took Lucy from me, and now they will die," he said. Then he ran out into the night. Drebber and Stangerson heard about Jefferson, so they left Salt Lake City. Jefferson followed them to another city, but they had lots of men with them, so they were safe. He couldn't do anything. Then they travelled to Russia and Denmark. Jefferson followed them, but they were always together. Then he found them in London. He was the last person they ever saw. Chapter 5. The End of the Game. We took Jefferson Hope to the police station at Scotland Yard. "I don't have much time," he said when we got there. "Are you a doctor?" he asked me. "I am," I said. "Then come here and listen to my heart." I put my hand over his heart. It was not working well, and I knew it could stop soon. "I lived for too long in the dry mountains of America," he said. "I've had a difficult life, and it was too much for my poor heart." He sat down in Sherlock's chair and started to talk to us. This is what he said. "Drebber and Stangerson had to die. Because of them, the woman I loved, Lucy Ferrier, and her father, John Ferrier, are dead. I followed them for 20 years, and now I can die a happy man because I found them." He stopped for a minute to ask for a glass of water, which I gave to him. "Lucy and I wanted to be together, but she had to be the wife of Enoch Drebber. She died a month later because she was so unhappy. When I found out, I wanted Drebber to die. I went to see Lucy for the last time, and I took the ring Drebber gave her off her finger. When I see Drebber, I will show him that ring, and then he will die. I followed Drebber and Stangerson everywhere, but they knew about me, so they were always together or had men with them to help them. But I stayed close to them. They got tired of me and went to another city in America, but after a time I found them again. Then they took a boat to Russia. I followed them. They went to Denmark, and I found them in Copenhagen. They were always together, Drebber and Stangerson. I had to wait. Then they came to London. They had a lot of money, and I had none. I got a job as a taxi driver. I have English clothes and my hair is long now, I thought. They won't know me. I found them at Charpentier's hotel, but as before, they were always together. Then one evening I was in my taxi when I saw Drebber and Stangerson going into Euston Station. Some minutes later, Drebber came out, but I couldn't see Stangerson. Now I have him, I thought. He got into a taxi, and I followed him to Charpentier's hotel. 10 minutes later, he came out with a young man who wasn't happy with him. Drebber wanted to get away from the young man, He saw my taxi and called me over. Then he got into my taxi. "I need to drink wine," he said. He drank all night. It was 1 in the morning when he told me to take him to a hotel, but I knew a house where no one lived, and I took him there. Drebber drank so much wine that night that he found it difficult to walk. We went inside the old house, and then I showed him Lucy's ring. "Now, Enoch Drebber," I said to him, "who am I?" He looked at me and knew he was a dead man. I put a knife near his head and showed him 2 pills. One is sugar and the other is poison. "You have to choose one," I said to him. "If you are a really bad man, then you will choose the poison. You will die, and I will live. Then I will go and find Stangerson, and he will also die." I had the knife, remember, and I am a very tall man. Drebber could not run away from me. He took the first pill, and I took the second. I didn't have to wait long. Very soon he was on the floor, and in 1 minute he was dead. I waited for 20 years for this. As you know, my heart is not good. I got excited when I was with Drebber. Blood started to come out of my nose like a scarlet river. I'll make things difficult for the police, I thought, and I wrote rash with my blood. Then I left the house, but I understood that I didn't have the ring. I went back to see if it was with Drebber and found a policeman there. It was good that he didn't understand who I was. Now I wanted to find Stangerson. It was Drebber who took Lucy from me, but a friend told me it was Stangerson who took the life of John Ferrier. I heard Stangerson was at Halliday's hotel. I waited with my taxi, but he didn't come out all day. When Drebber didn't come back to Euston Station, I think Stangerson understood I was near. I found out which was his bedroom window, and it wasn't difficult to get in. He didn't want to take a pill, so I put the knife into his heart. I used his blood to write rash. I went back to work as a taxi driver. Then a small boy told me a man at 221B Baker Street needed a taxi. And here I am. Jefferson Hope stopped talking. His face was white. We didn't say anything for a few minutes. Gregson and Lestrade took him to a room, and we never saw him again. When the police took his breakfast the next day, he was dead. His heart stopped that night. How did Sherlock know about Jefferson Hope? When we got to Lorriston Gardens, I knew we were looking for a taxi driver, Sherlock said. The taxi was outside the house for some time. I could see where the horse walked about. The taxi didn't leave, so I knew that the taxi driver was with Drebber. 2 men walked up the path. I looked at the path and saw where 2 men walked. One had big feet, so I knew he was tall. When we saw Drebber, I saw that he had small feet, so I knew that Big Feet was the man we needed. I also understood that Drebber died because of poison. I went close to his face. I could see the poison round his mouth. The next day, I sent a message to a policeman I know in New York. That was a big help. He told me that when Drebber was in New York, he had a problem with a man called Jefferson Hope. Then Drebber left America and went to St. Petersburg. So I asked my Baker Street police to find a tall taxi driver called Jefferson Hope. 3 days later, we had our man. "You have important things to teach the police," I said to him when he finished. "I don't think they'll listen to me. Here, read this." He gave me the morning newspaper and began to play his violin. Jefferson Hope is dead. We will never know everything about the deaths of Enoch Drebber and Joseph Stangerson. The man who took the lives of these two men was Jefferson Hope. The police found him, but he died at Scotland Yard police station last night after his heart stopped. We only know that Hope followed the two men for 20 years after his love, Lucy Ferrier, died. Mr. Lestrade and Mr. Gregson worked hard to find the right man. They're the best policemen in the country. We can all sleep safely in our beds now. "Your name isn't in the newspaper," I said. "No," Sherlock said happily. "The police never tell people that I help them." "I will," I said. "I'll tell everyone." That day, I started to write A Study in Scarlett. I wanted everyone to know about the great Sherlock Holmes.